western half of the United States swinging. This fit right in perfectly. And it's been so wonderful just listening to some of the others here. It's really incredibly inspirational, thinking about what an incredible nation we have and why it's so important that we preserve it, particularly for our children and for our grandchildren. It's a place of dreams, you know, as a youngster. You know, I had a dream of becoming a doctor. I loved anything on the radio or television about medicine. And I even like going to the doctor's office. So that tells you, a shot, no problem, as long as I can see the doctor. And going to the hospital was like the best thing in the world. Because, you know, we were medical assistants, so we'd have to wait for hours before one of the interns or residents could see us. And most people get all huffy, but I didn't mind it. I would sit out in the hallway, listen to the PA system. Dr. Jones, Dr. Jones, they heard this, Dr. Johnson, they sounded so important. And I'd be saying, one day they'll be saying, Dr. Carson, Dr. Carson. Of course, now we have beepers, so I still don't get to hear it. But you know, sometimes those dreams are the only thing that drive you. When everything else seems bleak, you cling to that dream. But sometimes dreams are not good. And some of you probably remember the case of the Jani twins, 29-year-old Iranian women, joined at the head several years ago. Their lifelong dream was to be separated. They scoured the planet looking for a king willing to take on that kind of risk. You know, when they first contacted me, you know, I told them about Chang and Ying Bunker, who never got separated, the original Siamese twins. And they lived until they were 63. But they didn't want to hear about that. And they kept searching. They found a team in Singapore that had separated some twins from Nepal. And I had actually been involved in that case, so they convinced me to come over and join them against my better judgment. And I was so impressed when I met those young men. They were full of personality, vivacious, smart. They had learned to speak English in only 7 months, if you can imagine that. They both had college degrees. They both had law degrees. Only one wanted one, but they both had law degrees. And so, you know, they had a very good impression of what it is that they were risking. And they said something to me that really struck me. They said, Doctor, we would rather die than spend another day stuck together. And that seemed kind of harsh to me. But then I thought about it. I put myself in their shoes, and that's always a good thing to do, put yourself in someone else's shoes. I said, what would it be like to be stuck to somebody 24/7? You couldn't get away for 1 second. How long would you like to? And I began to understand what they were going through. Well, that operation proceeded, and we were in the 3rd day. We were 90% separated. Some people were starting to celebrate. I was not among them. Because when we got to the very last part, they began to bleed profusely under a great deal of pressure. It was impossible to stop the bleeding. And they died. So not everything that we do is successful. And really, when you stop and you think about the history of surgery, when we first started doing kidney transplants, dismal results. Same things for hearts, lungs, livers. You would say, why would anybody even bother? The results were so dismal. But things were learned from every failure. And now all those operations are done quite routinely. And it goes outside of medicine. Thomas Edison said even 999 ways a light bulb did not work. Most of you heard of the cleaning formula 409. Why did they call it that? The first 400 days didn't work. But she just persistently learned. Walter Dandy, a famous neurosurgeon from Johns Hopkins, many decades ago. First one to try all kinds of things. First one to operate on posterior fossa. That compartment of the head is small. People said the tissue would swell, the patient would die. But Dandy operated on somebody with a lesion in the posterior fossa. The tissue did swell, and they did die. And another, and they died. And another, and they died. The first 13 all died. Can you imagine how discouraged he was? Can you imagine what he said to the 14th patient when they asked how the other 13 did? Probably said nobody's complaining, but you know. But the point is, he persisted, and now quite routinely and quite safely. And the point is, if you learn from things that don't work, if you learn from mistakes, you can move much faster. And when we look at history, it is a wonderful teacher. Because you think about all the nations before us and what they did. We are the pinnacle nation in the world. There's no question about that. But we're not the first pinnacle nation. There have been others before us. Ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, Great Britain, Spain, France. Pinnacle nation, number one, no competition. Gonna be there forever, they thought. Where are they now? What happened to each and every one of them? Same thing. They became enamored of sports and entertainment, lifestyles of the rich and famous. They lost their moral compass. They tolerated corruption, and they went right down the tubes. And some people say that can't happen to the United States. But obviously it's in the process of happening right now. The real question is, can we be the first pinnacle nation to actually learn from those before us and take corrective action? Or must we actually go down that same path of self-destruction? I think we can learn, because there's something different